Hello and welcome to Green and Gold Radio. I'm your host, William Plavin Masters, here with my very special intro today, Mr. Barrett.
Good morning / evening / afternoon, everyone. Great day to be an Eagle.
Yeah. So this episode, I'm going to have cool Bible facts, as we have in the past. And next, I'm going to have Mr. Urban and Mr. VanWhy from the Edsmen. So to start off, Mr. Barrett, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. We're in the second week of school, second full week. And I'm happy. I think that the freshman class is incredibly well-behaved and incredibly intelligent. It's awesome to see a new wave of Edsmen come in and get to know people that in a few years will be leaders in the school.
Yeah.
Heck, this year they can be leaders in the school. Who am I kidding?
Exactly.
How are you?
I'm doing good. Long day today, but it was very satisfying. Yeah. So what's our cool Bible story for today?
Oh, man, where to begin? How about a basic point about the Bible and then an interpretation of a scripture text?
Absolutely.
We'll go with that. So, the Gospels and the Gospel authors, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are incredibly fascinating. One, because of their importance in history and importance in handing on the transmission of divine revelation. And they're especially unique in the way that these authors are writing to communities that have specific needs, specific weaknesses, specific strengths, and they have something going on in the world that they live in. I remember Mr. Seeson, that's a shout out. He taught me this term in German called the Sitzenleben, and I think it translates in English to the situation at hand. Wow. So what's going on in the world when this text is written? And for Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there's different things going on in the world, different things going on in their communities. And to double down on these fascinating facts, these are not eyewitness accounts, right, which is something that I still wrestle with my faith, because I like to think that these are the apostles who spent their time with Jesus and wrote down what he was saying. But that's not true. Jesus died more or less around the year 33 AD, and Mark is on the scene in 60, and Matthew and Luke in 70s and 80s, and John all the way back to 90. So that's
the original
really
the original 90s.
Yeah,
the original 90s.
That's great. The OG 90s kids.
Yeah,
I like that. Rugrats and Jerusalem Rugrats. We'll call them
Jerusalem Rugrats.
If anybody's old enough, they might remember a great episode in Rugrats where Tommy's grandfather, I forget his name, but he tells the story of Hanukkah, really the book of Maccabees. There's a cool Bible fact for my 90s kids out there, taking it all the way back to Jerusalem 90s. Let's go. So, a gospel. Gospel means good news, and it's not meant to be an historical account, although it contains pieces in history. It's not a history book. It's more so a crafting to portray some light of some person. And in the Christian Gospels, of course, the authors have the intention of portraying Jesus in a particular way, so to draw out that good news for their readers. So our interpretation of the Gospel today, I think oftentimes at first glance, is to get the story of Jesus, to get the facts on Jesus. And while that's true, there's something more going on, something deeper going on. The authors are writing in a way so that these stories aren't just things that happened once, but are things that are happening today and things that will continue to happen. So one task that I have as a teacher of the Gospels is to encourage my students to read this in a way so that they see the facts and the truth and the historical elements that are in play, but ultimately see that these are stories that tell their own lives in a way. That they can, while reading the message out of the text, consider themselves in the text. So that the parable of the lost sheep is not just, one day a shepherd goes out, leaves the 99 and gets one, but that it's something that it continually happens in our own lives today. That's a fun fact, I think, about the overall nature of the Gospels. And now, if you don't mind, William, we'll take it to an interpretation.
Absolutely. I love these.
Yeah, these are great. And as I've grown older, In some cases, my interpretations have changed, but I would say more so that, they're not changing willy-nilly, but rather they're being augmented by different elements to help give me a better painted picture. And that happened with a conversation with Mr. Merriman once. He's the senior theology teacher, and he continually blows my mind with opening up doors to new worlds that have been closed to me in Scripture. And the story I want to consider today is in both Matthew and Luke, chapter 3. And both of those authors root Jesus' ministry in his relationship with John the Baptist. And it's early on in the gospel, chapter 3, and Jesus gets baptized. But they have some picture into John's ministry outside of Jesus, right? So John the Baptist, actually, no, I'm sorry. You might want to edit that. It's not necessarily outside of Jesus. It definitely deals with Jesus. Because as he's baptizing, people from all different areas come to him to hear this good news that he's preaching. And in one case, the Pharisees come to see him, and he refers to them as a brood of vipers. And he gives this warning sign, this warning speech, I'll call it, this ominous speech that I baptize with water, but there's one coming after me who will baptize with fire. And I'm not worthy enough to carry the sandals on his feet. And he makes this comparison to the authors make this comparison to what their initial audience would have understood. And that's an audience that would be in close contact with harvesting, with working with the earth, something that, you could ask my parents. I've definitely skipped chores of outside work,
Yeah.
Not even in having to do with harvesting, just cutting the grass.
I've actually got an interesting grass cutting story, if I can interject here.
Oh, hop right in, man.
So there's this one week where the grass got super tall on our lawn, right? I'd forgotten to do it. I was busy with schoolwork. So I got home at 11. And my mom said, no, you're going to cut the grass. So I was out there at 11 o'clock.
11 p.m.
Literally mowing the lawn.
No way.
And it was the funniest thing ever because I could not see. And I woke up the next morning and there were just these huge patches of tall grass. And then just like one swipe in the middle of more tall grass. And it was just a complete mismatch of just terrible lawn cutting.
What looked like a serious attempt to cut grass.
It
went awry.
Yeah, it went awfully.
That's
so
incredible.
Sorry to interject, but that was...
I love that. I've got a grass cutting story too. True.
Okay.
Too. One day, my grandfather, this is before I was born, he was cutting grass and he took a break. And, came back to it later at about midnight. And my grandmother got outside in her pajamas and started hollering at him, "Jack, what are you doing? It's 12 o'clock. And he's like, "I'm finishing cutting the grass." Took his break at, 2 p.m. and came back to it 10 hours later. So John the Baptist the authors of the text describe John the Baptist as making this reference to the harvest. And he says, "This man who's to come after me has his winnowing fan in hand, and he's going to take the wheat, and he's going to separate the chaff from the wheat, and the chaff will blow away, and he'll collect it on his ground, and he'll throw it into the fire, but the wheat he will keep." So when I was growing up, when I was in high school, when I was in college, even in my first year's teaching, I used to hear that story and think, all right, am I a person of wheat or am I a person of chaff? And it would be much easier for me to point out other people, that person's wheat, that person's chaff, that person's chaff, that person's wheat. But Mr. Merriman gave me an insight. He wrote a paper on this in college once, an exegesis paper. And he said that anybody who would have heard that story, who would have been directly involved in the harvest, would have known what that meant. And it's that every single piece of grain has chaff to it. So it's not so much, am I chaff or am I wheat, but I am both chaff and wheat and grain, harvestable grain. So fast forward again to Jesus' judgment of us. When he gets rid of the chaff, when all this outer shell is gone, is there a grain that's there? The chaff he's going to get rid of, but the grain he wants to keep. So if you think about the worst person that you know, or the person that you like least, you might just know their chaff. Heck, that person might just know their chaff, and they're only acting in the chaff. Oh my gosh. We want to talk about Thomas Merton, too, this great, prolific 20th century spiritual author.
Mr. VanWhy actually reads his...
No way.
I believe it's him. I'm not 100% sure. Reads his stories before class.
Really?
Yeah. He's got a book of them, I believe.
It's awesome. I know Mr. Williams is a big fan of Thomas Merton and uses him often in class. Thomas Merton makes this clear distinction throughout all of his writing that we have a false self and a true self. All of us do. I mean, and for the listeners now, think about your false self and your true self. And I imagine a great example of that today is Instagram or any social media platform. I only put the stuff that I think would get likes up on my social media. And that's just chaff. That's my outer shell.
I've actually got a, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I like to read a lot of philosophy.
Yeah.
And I forget who wrote it. I think it was by an anonymous Japanese author. But he says that we have three faces. One that we show everybody, the world. One that we show our close friends and family. And then one that we don't even see, one that's closed off even to us. And I brought this up in theology class last week, like, what if that face is only visible to God and to Jesus?
Yeah. And what if, over time, with progression, we come to know that face?
Right.
And then maybe that face not only becomes known to us, but also becomes known to others. Karl Rahner says that human beings don't just have questions, but they themselves are questions.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Think about that for a second, listeners. How are you a question? You yourself are a question. I love that passage with John the Baptist. He's a wild man, right? He's in the desert wearing animal skins and eating locusts and honey. And yet he's got this incredibly wise and incredibly ominous and in-your-face provocative message. It makes me think about my false self. Going back to Thomas Merton, I have the self that, I don't know, isn't necessarily me, but it's a self that I put on sometimes. And the fear then, since this is all in the context of Jesus' judgment, the fear is that we might become our false selves. What if I dwell in my chaff and if I dwell in my false self for so long that that's all I know? I forget about this grain. And this grain is, this notion that we're created in God's image and likeness. So to harvest the grain is not so much, are you good or bad? It's that you're good and bad. But what outlasts the other? Do you become the bad? Do you become the good? What is it that you're nourishing? That's my fun fact of the day, William Plavin Masters.
I love it. I love it so much. I think this was a genius segment to bring on. I really appreciate it, and just an absolutely profound and amazing statement. I'm going to go home, eat dinner, and just think about that for 2 hours.
Let's go. Let's go. I'm going to eat dinner and then fall asleep for 2 hours and then go to bed. And if I could add one last point, we stand on the shoulders of giants who have gone before us. That's not my thinking. That's Chris Merriman's thinking. And in a way, it's Chris Merriman's interpretation of somebody else's thinking. Matthew and Luke, John the Baptist, and even Jesus himself. If we go through that, we come to know the Father, our Creator. So always remember, you stand on the shoulders of giants. Amen, amen.
Amen, amen. I love that quote. So thank you so much for coming on today, Mr. Barrett.
Thanks for having me. I love doing this.
Oh, man, me too. Up next, we have Mr. VanWhy and Mr. Urban. We will be right back. Now. And welcome back. Here with my very special guests today, Mr. VanWhy and Mr. Urban. How are you doing this morning?
Doing well. Yeah, doing well. Another good day today. I'm excited to be on the podcast. So.
Yeah, this is rare air for us to be on Green and Gold Radio.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
exactly.
We're Green and Gold Radio famous now.
Yeah. So for a little background information, Mr. Urban, you're an English teacher here. and Mr. VanWhy, you're an honors government and history teacher, right?
Yeah.
So you're also the moderators of the school newspaper, the Edsman. Could you explain what the Edsman is for our listeners who haven't heard of or read the Edsman?
The Edsmen would have classically been described as our school newspaper many moons ago, which was a print paper that was kind of labored over in old typesetting formats and paper and glue and tape and scissors. And over the last 10 years or so, the paper has evolved into not only a print edition. We started to dabble in an online edition with social media, and then we've kind of almost done the full migration down to a student news website. And so it's a school newspaper that is ultimately to be created by students for the community. So our students and our school community can see, hey, what is the perspective of an Edsman from a news story perspective, and the pulse of how news goes, whether it's a daily story or something that's a feature, or maybe there's a significant news element in American culture, and we'd like to capture that voice and that perspective, which we think is uniquely Edwardian.
Right.
Yeah, definitely trying to be like a station for people to see what it's like to be an ed student in ways that are not just in the print media form now, where it kind of expands into also into stuff like videos for Ed's events, or just podcasts, right, William? I mean, hopefully we can be the home of Green and Gold Radio. And so it's definitely taken on some changes in the past couple of years, but I think we're excited about where it's going. And definitely we have the new platform this year that is revamped and looks great already. So that's something we're excited about.
And to Mr. VanWhy's point about the platform evolving, we're always there. Our moderators are, we're busy teachers and we're busy moderators, and it's always a lot of legwork to do with offering extracurriculars. We do look at this as a good opportunity. I moderated the Edsman a few years ago, and we were in the middle of that print to digital transition, and it was not easy because I think students really wanted digital, but we were kind of built for print, and it was good to see some other moderators take the lead and take the reins of the Edsman. And I am excited to be working with Mr. VanWhy, and he's a former student of mine. We have classrooms right next door to each other. There's a continuity there of not only St. Ed's history with us, but then also wanting to make the paper the best it can be. And I think it was nice to finally make decisions over the summer that just said, hey, let's get a new website going. Let's have it built, from an outside company, so it's supported and is a platform that is indicative of the quality of not only from a design standpoint, but from a functionality standpoint that the Edsmen should kind of be deserving of, and that our student writers and contributors should be deserving of and proud to demonstrate to the community. So we're still getting a lot in order. Our site is live, and we'll promo that later this episode, but we're getting close to like a bigger launch and a bigger promotional campaign.
Absolutely. So your student writers, what do they write about? What does the newspaper itself encompass?
Well, I mean, in the meetings, it's trying to figure out, if you want to take a larger story, how can we apply it to the Eds community, but also just from an Eds perspective, what's it like being in school? I mean, recently we've had articles about what the start of the school year was like, and how students were making the transition, how it feels, maybe different classroom environments, how that feels, what it's like now with the changes around the school. So really just trying to get a feel for what it's like to be here. And it's a pretty organic process where students just talk about interests, where you can go from there, and ways in which you can write about that, bouncing ideas off each other from that Ed's perspective.
And our categories are pretty traditional. We have news that could be community-based, school-based. We still want students to potentially tackle world news. That was a challenge of my first go-around with moderating the Edsman, is how do we weigh what's important to our school community with what's going on in the world? And sometimes our guys would really want to write these big news pieces that some days by the time they got published were already kind of antiquated or out of date, and it was tough. It was fun to watch guys go big, but sometimes we can still be community news writers, and so so a lot of the news will be through the Edwardian perspective, but then we have the classic categories. We have sports, we have arts, we have op-eds, we have, because we're St. Ed's, we, instead of calling them opinion editorials, we have a nice little namesake there. We could just call them op-eds and start not only examining opinions or arguments in culture, but potentially and respectfully getting guys to volley some topics for, if they're for and against certain topics. We could have two guys kind of almost doing like a face-off or a write-off. But to Mr. VanWhy's point earlier about video and other media content, it's really important for us to tap into that kind of platform that already exists. There are students doing post-game interviews already. There's Green and Gold Radio, which is currently what we're on, raise the roof. But it's also, we're also able to share that and link that to the community, and it's I'm excited even just in the microcosm of this is just even that is exciting, knowing there's a Green and Gold Radio program that has a regular host, that has a bigger objective.
Great guests.
Great guests, of course.
Amazing guests.
It's exciting to be able to couch that content on the Edsmen and really make the Edsmen as robust as it should. It's not that we haven't had good content through the years, but we have a sister school in Indiana, Cathedral High, and we met with their journalism teacher and school newspaper moderator. His name's Tony Willis. And Mr. Willis was really helpful to us in terms of just demonstrating, one, the platform that was built for him, and we did go with the same company that built our site, but the content that his students are producing is amazing. And he does have a full, he has journalism courses he's instructing, and he has journalism students who largely populate his staff. We are more grassroots right now, and we're building staff, and we've actually gone from a really small staff to within the last week and a half, staff has begun to expand, and I don't think we'll be fully operational for some time. We will be posting stories. Our site will be live. We will be excited about that promotion, but I think we're going to be building staff throughout the year, with an eye on the possibility of bringing back a writing for publications class or a journalism course that we'd rather build into our course catalog. That way we have students who are here daily thinking about journalism, and that can pair well with Edsman production, rather than right now it just being a co-curricular. So
Absolutely. Hint, hint, listeners, get involved. So on this website that I've looked at, and it looks pretty good so far, so how often on the website does the Edsman release new content?
Right now we're in like a rolling state where we're getting content as we can. We had we got in touch with some staffers over the summer. Didn't want to oblige them to too much because we were in a building state for the new site. But right now we had our first meeting last week, so we do have some assignments out there. Because it's a web page, we're in a rolling state of not only production and submission and sharing to the community. We do want to get into a regular, maybe a regular set of days where there's feature stories. Like right now, we have a fantasy football. Nathan Lacer Focused Fantasy is a weekly, and right now that's posting like on Fridays or Saturdays, right around the time guys are setting their lineups. So there might be some pieces that are timely. So right now it's more of a rolling phase until we get into a regular staff contributions and kind of a groove of knowing which editors are covering which category.
And that gives us some freedom, too, with that rolling state, to where we can post when we feel it's necessary to, and it doesn't have to be this deadline-based, but also you have to keep an eye on those deadlines, too, because you don't want to get too lax in these situations, and you want to make sure that you're still putting out content a lot, because we want this to be a site that people really do see as a station and that they can go to for information about Eds, and you want to keep that at least still happening. Getting those posted, and so it's good and bad at the same time with those ruling dates.
I think the platform helps us make this a voice and platform for the students. In the past, when you're creating a print publication, it's not that print is more timeless than the internet or internet access platform, but sometimes there's a ubiquity to the internet where stories can be forgotten, or it just gets lost in the shuffle or in the archive of a web page. Whereas in print, we would probably pore over that very narrowly, and I was guilty in the past as moderator of overly curating that and not letting it from a majority perspective really be the voice of the students. And I just like the possibilities. Once we get some of the logistics aligned, we should be able to churn out a lot of content and have it really just demonstrate what it becomes a cool demonstration of what the kind of like the real, like, tangible experience of being a St. Ed student is, while also being informative and sharing other experiences to the community.
So you guys have been involved with this for a little while. What would you say is your favorite part about the Edsmen, just as a whole?
Well, I mean, it's just fun interacting with students and seeing them try to figure out the ideas they want to write about, what they're interested in. Going through that process is something that's fun, trying to help them out. And also, I mean, for me personally, getting to work with, Mr. Urban, a guy who did a lot for me in terms of my educational career, is really great. And being able to bounce ideas off of him about a publication that we care about, that we want to show. Really, again, like we've talked about a lot, is show the Eds culture, and getting to work with him in that is really great for me, I know.
Yeah, and to piggyback that, it is exciting. It's one of the unique facets of being at St. Ed's is, as you get older and hopefully wiser as a teacher, you get to, the circle of life happens, and then you start working with former students who become your friends and colleagues, and it's fun to participate in St. Ed's history together. I'm really excited to work with Mr. VanWhy because I know we're putting a lot in place to try to really maximize the potential for the Edsmen in a way that's I don't want to say it's been overdue, but it's exciting to be trying to maximize what the Edsmen can be. I'm as though I'm an English teacher and I love different news platforms and different reading different sites and being an informed person of the world. I can't always say my thumb is always on the pulse of, hey, what is the student experiencing and how are the students' voices being used, to show what the experience of an Edsman is. And it's fun to be part of that. It's fun to be in the conversations. It's fun to learn from the students. Like even our first meeting, the second week of the school year, we had that first meeting. You just start to peel back the layers and you start to see other ideas. Just even though in that meeting they're just an idea or it's just an inkling, you can see it starting to take shape into other things and into something that's much bigger. Even Green and Gold Radio. I know we've done quite a few plugs in this episode. It's it's good to be self-serving and self-effacing, but even that, it's fun to be in this podcast right now. Just being able to say, one, what is the content of our news site, but two, also to be using an Eagle platform, from a St. Ed sophomore who has the initiative and the drive to make a St. Ed specific radio podcast. It's exciting, and I think there's so many more platforms and vehicles out there that we're just trying to kind of harvest all those and use the Edsman site as a place to package it. And it's just that part alone is exciting. And then as I'm getting a little older and long in the tooth at St. Ed's, it's just you forget sometimes. You get a little caught up in the work, and there's days it's just not about the work. It's about the experience of being here and letting young men be young men and figure it out, not always have the answers for them, and then also be led by them. That's exciting. So, and even in our first meeting, we had a current junior, Sam Richardson, who's already written a couple of really good pieces for this year's site. Sam is eager to continue to put structure around just a lot of our operations, and it's good to always know that there's a student or set of students who have that same drive, because it does align with what we want for them too. but to see them do that of their own volition it's awesome, and it's part of the great fun of being at St. Ed's.
Absolutely. So you have mentioned that you were a part of the Edsmen, right? Before it all restructured and everything. So that brings to mind, how long has the Edsmen been a part of St. Edward's?
So, it's a funny question. I have some old archived print copies from the 70s. And I'm also the moderator of Flight magazine, and we're on our 67th volume of Flight this year.
Wow.
And in terms of like the long history of the Edsmen, I'm presuming it goes back to the origins of the school. I would think a school newspaper or a student-led newspaper was early on. I don't have any other, though there are archives through our institutional advancement office. They do have a lot of old works archived, and I know there's more volumes and editions prior to the 70s. But we're going on over 50 years of tradition. It's just that, and a lot of students and our community members know this, print media has changed and has evolved, and stories that took a while to lay out that probably seemed like more timeless stories, we're in a bubble of news stories that just really, they get antiquated really fast. And I'm Mr. VanWhy and I are definitely entertaining having a few print issues that could be a bit more, I keep saying the word timeless, but what I mean by that is, like we could potentially have a Christmas edition, or, an end of year edition. One category of the Edsmen I forgot to mention earlier is the Herbsman category. The Herbsman is an homage or a shout out to the phrase herb, which is not so much such a popular colloquialism in the modern age, but when my brother was at St. Edward High School in the mid to late 80s, herb was an endearing term for a freshman, and but for our purposes, the Herbsman is a satire section of the Edsmen, which just gives us a chance to have a little fun, to make some jokes at ourselves, and participate in the snarky worldview that sometimes we need to have to keep ourselves sane. But that typically in the past was our April print edition, and so we're still kicking tires on that, and we'd like to print those on occasion, because those do become hard copy archives of student experience. Though because we have through the beauty of the internet and our new site, we're able to largely archive every story now moving forward. Even with the new site build, we were able to migrate old content over, and so there's still some stuff that's kind of dated on there. But it's nice for those guys that were on staff with the Edsmen when we did start this digital migration, probably about 5, 6, 7 years ago. Some of those stories still exist in the ether, and it's kind of it's a very narrow curation of their work, but it's still out there, and that's exciting.
Yeah, and then with the stuff like the Herbsman, though, I think that's nice where it does allow that creativity in an area that you wouldn't think necessarily you can have the creativity. And also, I mean, in picking stories, you can also find your own lane there, but it's a way for that writing that you wouldn't necessarily think of in a school print document, which is fun.
Absolutely. So you're talking about old print documents and archives and stuff. So the Edsman has changed its fundamental format from hard copies to a website. Where's the website? How can students access it?
So the new Edsman website is edsmen.net. So we chose that URL because it's specifically on brand. We are the Edsmen. We've had a couple iterations of web URL names that were a little bit longer. Some of it was to save cost, but we really felt like the investment this year was really important to invest in making sure we were supported by an outside resource who could build our site, troubleshoot for us. The long-term gain of that is it permits us to challenge our staffers to produce better content, to focus on their journalism talents. But the new site is edsmen.net. Mr. VanWhy and I and our staff will be doing some heavy promotion over this next month. Right now, students have only been able to access that, one, if they know the site, which some students do. Two, if they access it through our Twitter page, which is our handle on Twitter is @the_Edsmen. And so typically every time we post a new story, we will blast that story on Twitter. And we're nowhere near our capacity for social media usage. We talked about it at last meeting. I think that will be another really big goal for this school year, is to get students following the new Edsman Twitter page, which is a couple years old. But our new handle doesn't have quite as many followers as our old handle did, and we want to get that increased significantly. And then just to continue to increase readership, we really have a goal of wanting to make Edsman.net a normal, almost like a habitual part of a student's day. It'd be great for students to just see that as a regular part of their information exchange. Hey, what's on the Edsman.net today? And if we're providing the right content and providing it in an intense enough circulation, students will want to go there.
Absolutely. It seems like just a new format that I think students will enjoy. And I think if you do some content maybe about how crazy this year has been, I think that would make an interesting article. Because this has been one crazy year.
Yeah, there's plenty of content right now. I think that's it'll be a challenge, but it'll be fun steering students in the right direction. And it's like people want to hear. I think our student body wants to hear that everybody's going to be okay and everybody's going to do okay. And I think sometimes it's just like putting that idea, whether it's a Herbsman satire piece, because sometimes satire can be a nice alleviation of from all this serious stuff that we're all trying to do, and or it could be just reading a classmate's experience on. Sometimes it's like, hey, maybe you had a bad week, but then you read Sam Richardson's piece on his first week, and you realize, all right, it's going to be okay. And we see the structure that the school administration has put in place. We see students kind of putting one foot in front of the other, and a lot of classes, if not all the classes, are full go. And knowing that the Edsmen can at least put those stories out there and help us see a bigger picture is really exciting.
Yeah, just seeing that other people are going through it, and that you could reach out to some people. And this isn't just you; it's a solidarity, right? We're all in this one, going for the same goal, hoping that this year is going to be fantastic.
Absolutely. So you'd mentioned earlier that you need a bigger staff, a wider range of people to get involved. How can students become involved with the Edsmen if they're interested in doing so?
Well, if they want to become involved in the Edsmen, you could either email myself or Mr. Urban, but every Thursday in my room 209, we meet after school, and really it's pretty low pressure there. We talk about ideas, and we want to get at least some sort of timetable if you have an idea about when to write, but definitely welcome everyone there on Thursdays to meet with us and discuss.
Mr. VanWhy and I have been, pushing the Edsmen in our classrooms in terms of involvement and just maybe awareness. And it'll be nice to know that we're going to be promoting the site much more openly, because we're still building content. It's tough to kind of build a new site and content at the same time without having either a staff that's involved in journalism as a class, or a paid staff, which is obviously not going to happen in a high school. But it's hard to get that content built, though that page is building. And as that keeps going, I think we're going to hopefully just kind of keep our feelers out and keep getting students. Maybe as we know students are involved in certain activities, sports or campus ministry, any given number of extracurriculars on our campus. Sometimes if we know that student is in our classrooms, it's almost as simple as, hey man, I'd like a story on this, or hey, talk to your moderator and see if he or she is willing to write a piece, or who knows. Not that I want to overwork William, our gracious host today, but I would love. It'd be great to maybe see other moderators sitting on Green and Gold Radio and just being able to talk. Maybe it wouldn't be as long as this episode, but who knows? If the structure's there and it works for you, William. Could be another vehicle or another avenue for getting more people involved and sharing those stories, and again, that just in turn puts us in a position of sharing that content. We almost just become the conduit for content rather than it only solely being staff driven. But to Mr. VanWhy's point, every Thursday after school in room 209, no experience necessary. It's not that right now we're going to teach you to be some hardened journalist. I do have a degree in journalism, and I knew when I got my degree right after that, I was like, I don't know if I'm cut out for it. I didn't know if I was hard hitting enough. I probably didn't have the confidence to walk into a room and try to really get the scoop and get the story. I do think long term our goals are definitely to improve journalistic content, editing content, and maybe get back to a place where students who do want to be in maybe a new age sense of the media, or if they do want to be students who want to bring integrity back to journalism, hey, why not have that start at St. Ed's? That's got to start somewhere, and I think it'd be great if we can be shepherds of that. And that's a big, lofty, aspirational goal, but I think it's realistic given the platform that we're building.
Absolutely. I'm loving the Edsman. I'm loving how you guys are running it, and I appreciate you guys coming on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, William.
Thank you, William.
Yeah.
This has been Green and Gold Radio. I'm your host, William Plavin Masters, signing off.